I have $2 million saved. Am I still on track to retire? That is the question we're going to ask ourselves today. We're going to take you through a plan to figure out what that answer is. Thank you for joining. My name is Graham Ewing. I'm the Director of Financial Planning here at the Financial Consulate. So let's dive in. The first question we have to ask ourselves is, when are we going to retire? That has a huge impact. Is it going to be 60? Is it going to be 62? When is that year that we're going to retire? And then on the other side, here we see age 92. How long are you going to live? We don't know, but we have to make an assumption. In this program, we call that the end of plan. So when is the start of retirement and when is the end of plan? The second question is, what does retirement look like? What are my goals? What am I going to be spending in retirement? Am I going to be someone that's sitting on my couch reading a book every day? Am I going to be someone that wants to travel the world? Two completely different answers, two completely different things you need to retire. So this here on the page, you can see the icons at the top. That is a type of list that you can pull from, really, meant to inspire. And in this instance, you just forget about the money for a second and think about, well, what do I want to do in retirement? So for George and Martha here, we have 5 goals, 5 spending goals. We have healthcare, we have gifts or donations, we have travel of $15,000 a year, and we have basic living. This kind of catches everything else. So in this example, we're saying that George and Martha would spend about $10,000 a month. And while I didn't mention this yet, this is George and Martha Washington. They also have a wish, and they would like a new horse carriage. That's another goal that we have here. So before you retire, this arguably is the most important thing to ask yourself. What is it that we're even going to do in retirement? And once you have that understanding, then we can start to put some numbers around it to get to the financial side of things. And the third question then is, how are we supporting all of those goals? What are we using to pay for them? We have Social Security, we have our pensions, we have our investments. So if we go down this list, Social Security for George and Martha is where we start. And we can see in this example, if at age 67, George would receive $48,000 in Social Security, and Martha would also receive $48,000 in Social Security. But you can see, and we have another webinar on this you can watch about when to collect Social Security, but if George waited until 70, instead of getting $48,000, he would see that grow to $60,000 per year. That's a big question, one that we're not going to dive into deep today, but Social Security is one of those pieces of how do we pay for the goals. Now, a lot of people don't have pensions anymore, but if you do, we have to identify how much is that pension. Is there going to be a survivor scenario on that pension? Meaning if the person that's currently receiving it passes away, will their spouse still get a percentage or all of the pension? But that is a piece of how are we going to pay for all that retirement spending. In this case, George is getting a $40,000 pension, and it ends when George's plan ends, the end of plan, as we said earlier. And the next part of supporting all of those goals is, of course, the savings. So this is made up as retirement savings, both in Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs. You might have a TSP or a 401k or a 403b. Many times once people retire, they really get consolidated into these types of accounts, the traditional IRAs, the Roth IRAs, or a brokerage account. In this case, Martha and George both have $200,000 in a Roth IRA, and they have about $800,000 in a traditional IRA. Roth IRAs are after tax, traditional IRAs are pre-tax, so we have to treat these different in the calculation. But $2 million is what we have saved, so are we on track? So we have our retirement date, we have our spending, we know what we're going to support with that's what we're going to use to support that spending, the Social Security, the pension, the savings. Now the question that really it comes down to is, can I fund all my goals without running out of money? We don't know what markets are going to do. Are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? Are they going to go sideways? So we run 1,000 different simulations to see, did I run out of money? And all of it's factored in, not just the savings, but also the pension, the Social Security, all that's factored in, which we'll show you more on a spreadsheet in a second. But if we run this analysis, we can see for George and Martha, retiring at 62, 2 years from now, they are 86% probability of success, meaning that of all those 1,000 trials, you see all these different lines, 1,000 of them, 868 of them were successful. So that's good. We have, you can see here in the right, we've got a confidence zone there in the green and the blue. And ultimately, the question is, how confident do you want to be that you are not going to run out of money? So this looks good on the surface, but the way I really look at this analysis and this planning, Dwight Eisenhower said it best. He says, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. So I look at this kind of like a GPS. If you think about going on a road trip from Maryland to California, you put in your Google Maps or your Apple Maps, it's going to take 5 days of continuous driving to get there. But inevitably, you could run into an accident. You could run into traffic. You could run into a detour, some construction. So if you look at this here, and we're in 2025, and we look all the way out here to 2050, if you look at it once and never look at it again, we could find ourselves getting closer and closer to traffic or closer and closer to an accident. But in reality, the best course of action is we want to continually revise and update this. So if for some reason this 86% probability of success started to go down, we'd want to see, well, what adjustments can we make to bring that back up? And that adjustments is going to be the next page that I go to, and that is actually the most fun of them all. Okay, so we call this the play zone. We try and make our planning with clients as collaborative as possible, and it's important. It's your plan, so we want to figure out, what do you want? And this page here is an incredible tool that we use to figure out, well, what works. So as we established, retiring at age 62, you get an 86% probability of success. Well, what if someone says, I want more than that. 86% is not quite enough. If we said, all right, let's put you to 64, age 64. You both are going to retire at age 64. That plan goes from 86% up to 93%. But we already have a pretty solid plan at 86%. So let's say, hey, what if I could actually retire today at 60 instead of 62? How would that impact the plan? We go from 86% down to 75%. So you have that lever to choose. Am I going to work later or am I going to retire earlier to help out the plan? The other lever that we can do is we can say, well, how much spending are we going to do? Again, that example of, am I going to be traveling the world every single month, or am I going to be sitting on a couch reading a book? Two completely different lifestyles that require different levels of support. So let's say George and Martha, they don't need $120,000 per year, $10,000 a month of basic living expense. Let's change that to be $100,000 instead. They're going to retire at 60 instead of 62. We lowered their spending to about $100,000, and now they're up to 98% probability of success. You see how that lever is really powerful and really impacts the question of, am I still on track to retire? So you see, we've got all these goals, and we can say, well, we're going to lower our normal spending of $120,000 to $102,000, but we really love to travel. So let's change this $15,000 to actually be $20,000. We're going to add $5,000 every single year. Well, that 98% dropped to 96%. But now, this is George and Martha Washington we're talking about, and as we established, they have a wish. They want that new horse carriage, and they want the luxury horse carriage. So instead of $10,000, let's say it's going to be $100,000. We change it to $100,000, and that 96% probability of success comes out to be 94% probability of success. If you noticed how that was a big dollar change, but it didn't change the probability of success that much. The reason for it is that this is a one-time expense. If you go back up here and we look at the basic living, that is every single year for that 30 years of retirement. And this is after tax, this is inflation adjusted. This all plays a huge role when it happens for many, many years versus a one-time expense. So getting a handle on really that basic living expense, what do I spend every year versus the one-off things, the one-time things that don't happen every other of those 20 of those 30 years. This is the most important thing you could really do to find, am I on track? Is to figure out what is my spending going to be? Because as you saw, it has such a big impact. The other thing that you can do is you can say, let's change our investments. So if anybody is familiar with, I'm throwing some jargon out for a second, but risk and return. So return, that one's pretty simple. It's, am I getting a higher rate of return or not? Risk is really that question of, am I the risk of losing money in any one year? So if we said, hey, I really want to sleep better at night. This fluctuation in the markets, I just cannot handle. Well, we could make it more conservative, but you're also going to get generally a lower rate of return for more conservative investment. So let's do that. Let's say for George and Martha, we're going to make this a conservative portfolio. And that works really well, 99% probability of success. Now let's go back up here to spending. Just bear with me. Let's go back up to the let's actually change it. We'll say $130,000. Okay? That spending of $130,000 takes us to 0% probability of success. So now let's go back down the investments and say, well, I'm willing to take on a little bit more risk to get a little bit higher rate of return. So let's put that back up to the most aggressive. And while still not quite as high as we want, you can see that went from 0% to 40%. We're trading that volatility for a higher rate of return. So for longer term investments where we can afford to let things recover if there is a down market, that could make sense. But for shorter term things, we might want to do the conservative portfolio. All of these rates of return in this are purely hypothetical. This is just for an illustration. But this is another lever you have to consider, is how am I invested? That impacts the plan. Okay, so we went over that play zone. We talked about how you can collaborate. And so far, all you've seen is the probability of success. So let's actually look at the numbers. We're going to dive a little deeper here and see this spreadsheet. Now, there's a lot on this spreadsheet, but I'm going to walk you through it. You see the columns are a year. So George and Martha, as we established in our baseline, are going to retire at 62. So 2027 is that first year of retirement, and it goes all the way out to that end of plan. And you can see on the top left, we have their income. So that's mainly their pension and their Social Security. So we can see George's pension starts at 62 and it starts at 40,000, but that's growing with inflation. That pension comes with an inflation adjustment. But if you go all the way out to 2032, you can see their Social Security started. So they jump from $44,000 of income in 2031 to $160,000 of income when you add in that Social Security. So that's the income. That's the first step here. But then we go and look at all of their spending. We go back to 2027 and we talked about how their basic living was originally at $120,000, but that was in today's dollars. And because of the inflation adjustment, we now show $126,000. So you add up all of those spending goals, including that new horse carriage, and we say your total goal funding is $193,000. But then we say your taxes on top of that, in this example, are $48,000. So your total outflows are $241,000. We said your income is $40,000, your spending is $240,000, so that actually means you have a deficit of $201,000. Well, that sounds bad, but really deficit in this example just means that's what we pull from the portfolio. So that $2 million savings, that $2 million portfolio we talked about earlier, that has grown a little bit in this example to $2.2 million. If it's going to get dividends, interest, capital gains of about $100,000, 111, but we're taking out $201,000, then that inevitably means the portfolio is actually going to go down a little bit, $2.2 million to $2.13 million. And you can follow this the whole way down. And in fact, it goes to current dollars. This is where it's the question of what does the portfolio feel like in the future? So we can look at all of these numbers and follow it all the way out to the end of the plan. And you can see again, we've got that deficit up here, and we've got some earnings. In this case, the earnings are actually higher than the deficit, the distribution. So your portfolio is actually growing in that case. So this is just, I'm not going to dive even further into this, but this is just what's happening under the hood. This is behind the scenes, how the numbers are actually being crunched. And this is how we get to that probability of success. And ultimately, that is how you figure out, am I on track to retire? It comes down to things like, when am I going to retire? What am I going to do in retirement? What do I have to support all of that? Is there one magic number? Is it $2 million? Is it $10 million? Is it $1 million? There's not one right or wrong answer. It's not one size fits all. You have to look at your specific circumstances and see, what do I want to have a retirement that I've worked so hard to get to? And maybe you want an 86% probability of success. Maybe you're okay with a 60% probability of success, because again, this is not a set it and forget it. We want to make these changes and review things as markets go up and down, as life circumstances change. All of that is incredibly important to this conversation. So if you're watching this and you want to review your plan, please reach out to your advisor. If you're not a client, feel free to reach out and schedule an intro. If you know somebody who's on the cusp of retirement and really could enjoy seeing this or benefit from seeing this or want to talk to us, please share this with them, and we're happy to talk to them. And last but not least, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. We put out a video every single month. We'll put out one next month, and we hope to see you there.